He grabbed her arm in front of 500 people, dragged her across a ballroom floor worth more than most people will ever see in a lifetime, and shoved her so hard she hit the marble and bled. His mother stood behind him, smiling. His mistress laughed and walked away in heels that clicked like a countdown, and not a single person in that room moved to help her. She lay there on the cold stone, tears mixing with blood, while her husband stood over her and said the words he had been saving for this moment. "You will never amount to anything. You are nothing. You came from nothing, and you will leave with nothing." But then something fell from her dress, a small silver pendant. It slid across the marble floor and stopped at the feet of an old security guard. He picked it up, read the engraving, and his face went white, because that pendant carried a secret that was about to destroy everything her husband thought he knew, everything his mother believed, everything his mistress had schemed for. The woman he had just shoved to the floor of a $60 billion mansion was the woman who owned it. She had always owned it, and she had no idea. This story will remind you of something we all forget too easily. Your worth is never determined by how people treat you when they think you have nothing. It is determined by who you are when nobody is watching. And sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the most powerful one in the building. If this story gave you chills, if it made you feel something real, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this. Drop a comment and tell me, what would you have done if you were Lenora? Share this with someone who needs to hear that their value does not depend on anyone else's opinion. And if you are still here, thank you. You are the reason we do this. The security camera captured everything in cold, clinical detail. A woman in a borrowed dress stumbling backward across a marble floor. A man's hands still extended from the shove. 500 guests in evening wear, frozen like statues in a museum nobody wanted to visit. And then the sound, that awful, unmistakable crack of a human body hitting Italian marble at full force. Lenora Washington hit the floor of the Harrison Estate ballroom, and the impact sent a jolt of pain through her shoulder and hip that made her vision blur. Blood appeared on her lip, bright red against the white marble, and for a moment, the only sound in that $60 billion mansion was her own ragged breathing. Her silver pendant, the one her grandmother had placed around her neck when she was 8 years old, broke free from its chain and skidded across the floor, spinning in the chandelier light before coming to rest against a pair of polished black shoes. Nobody moved to help her. 500 of the most powerful people in the city watched a woman bleed on the floor, and not a single one of them stepped forward, because in rooms like this, power was the only currency that mattered, and as far as anyone knew, Lenora Washington had none. Her husband Darnell stood over her, breathing hard, his handsome face twisted with something that lived between rage and satisfaction. His mother Beverly stood behind him, with her champagne glass raised like she was toasting a victory. And Candace Thornton, the woman who had replaced Lenora in every way that mattered, clicked her heels on the marble as she walked away laughing. But none of them saw the old security guard kneel down and pick up that pendant. None of them saw his hands tremble as he read the engraving, and none of them heard him whisper into his radio with a voice that shook with 40 years of waiting. "Code Harrison. Ballroom. She is here. Send Mr. Vincent immediately." 72 hours earlier, Lenora had been a different woman. Not different in the way people mean when they talk about transformation. Different in the way a person is different when they have been slowly, methodically erased from their own life, one piece at a time, over 5 years, until they cannot remember what their own voice sounds like, when it is not apologizing. She woke up at 5:15 on a Tuesday morning in an apartment she could barely afford, in a bed that was half empty because her husband had not come home again. The sheets on his side were cold and smooth, untouched. She had stopped being surprised by this. Surprise requires expectation, and Lenora had stopped expecting anything from Darnell Washington a long time ago. She made breakfast anyway. 2 plates, scrambled eggs with cheese, toast with butter, coffee with cream, and 2 sugars the way he liked it. 1 plate would go uneaten, like every morning, and she would scrape the food into the trash around 7:30 before leaving for work. And she would feel that familiar pinch of waste and sadness that had become as routine as brushing her teeth. The apartment was small but clean. Lenora kept it spotless because Beverly, Darnell's mother, had a habit of showing up unannounced and running her finger along surfaces, looking for dust like she was conducting a health inspection. The furniture was modest, bought on clearance, and the one beautiful thing in the apartment was a framed photograph of Lenora's grandparents, Thomas and Ruth, standing in front of their little wooden house in rural Georgia, with smiles so wide you could feel the warmth through the glass. Lenora touched the photograph as she walked past it, a habit she had developed since Ruth's death 2 years ago. Thomas had died the year before that, both of them gone now, taking their warmth and their secrets with them. She drove to the hospital in a car with 187,000 miles on it. The check engine light had been on for 6 months, glowing orange on the dashboard like a tiny warning that Lenora could not afford to acknowledge. She could not afford to fix the car because Darnell had borrowed her savings 4 months ago for what he called a business opportunity, and the money had never come back, and she had learned not to ask about it. At Riverside Memorial Hospital, Lenora was a different person entirely. She worked pediatric oncology, the ward where children fought battles that no child should ever have to fight, and she was extraordinary at her job. The kids called her Miss Lenora, and they drew her pictures that she taped to the inside of her locker. Their parents trusted her with the most precious things in their lives, and she held that trust with a tenderness that came from somewhere deep and unbreakable inside her. Her supervisor, Dr. Crawford, stopped her in the hallway that morning with news that made her heart lift for the first time in weeks. "Lenora, I want you to know that you are being considered for the head nurse position. You have earned it. Your patient outcomes are the best on this floor, and every family I have spoken to mentions you by name." Lenora felt tears prick her eyes, the good kind, the rare kind. "Thank you, Dr. Crawford. That means everything to me." She floated through the morning on that small piece of hope, and at lunch she sat in the break room checking her phone. No messages from Darnell, no missed calls, just a blank screen reflecting a face that was beautiful in a quiet way that most people overlooked. Dark eyes that held more sadness than a 32-year-old woman should carry, and a silver pendant resting against her collarbone that caught the fluorescent light. Her best friend Clara Jenkins appeared in the doorway, holding 2 containers of leftover pasta, and wearing an expression that meant she had opinions she intended to share whether anyone asked for them or not. "Girl, are you sitting here, staring at your phone, waiting for that man to text you?" Clara set the pasta down with more force than necessary, "Because I have been meaning to talk to you about something my therapist told me, and I think you need to hear it. Clara, I am fine. You are not fine. You are eating hospital cafeteria salad for lunch because he borrowed your grocery money for business, and I am using air quotes around that word so hard right now. Let me tell you something. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. You are out here waiting for version 2.0 of a man who never even installed the update." Lenora laughed despite herself. and the sound surprised her because she could not remember the last time she had done it. Clara had that effect on people. She was loud where Lenora was quiet, fierce where Lenora was gentle, and she had a way of saying the truest things wrapped in humor so they went down easier. Clara pushed the pasta toward her. Eat real food and listen to me. You know what the definition of insanity is? Doing the same thing over and over expecting different results. You have been reheating that man's dinner plate every night for 5 years, like he is suddenly going to walk through the door with flowers and an apology. He is my husband, Clara. A husband who does not come home, a husband who takes your money, a husband whose mother treats you like dirt on her designer shoes. Clara leaned forward, and her voice softened. You deserve so much more than this, Lenora. You know that, right? Lenora touched her pendant, the way she always did when she needed comfort. I know, she said quietly, but knowing and doing something about it are two different things. Clara studied her for a long moment, then said something that Lenora would remember later when everything changed. There's a difference between surviving and waiting to drown, baby. And I am starting to worry about which one you are doing. Lenora came home that Tuesday evening to find 3 people sitting at her kitchen table, eating food that someone had ordered from the Italian restaurant downtown, the one she and Darnell had gone to on their first date. The one she could no longer afford. Darnell sat at the head of the table, which was something he had started doing recently, positioning himself like a king in a castle that Lenora's nursing salary was paying for. To his left sat his mother, Beverly, a 58-year-old woman who dressed like she was attending a charity gala every day of her life, and who had a face that had forgotten how to smile with kindness. And to Darnell's right sat Candace Thornton. Candace was 33, an attorney at a prestigious firm, and she was everything Lenora was not. Bold, polished, aggressive, in a way that made rooms rearrange themselves around her. She wore confidence like armor, and her laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. Darnell introduced her as his business partner whenever anyone asked, but the way her hand rested on his arm, the way she leaned into him when she spoke, the way she looked at Lenora with something between pity and triumph, told a story that required no introduction at all. "Oh, good, you are home," Beverly said, without looking up from her plate. "The chicken from last night was dry, by the way. I told Darnell you would ruin dinner even when you were not cooking it. It is like failure follows you." Lenora set her bag down quietly. She had learned to move through her own home like a guest, careful and apologetic, taking up as little space as possible. She murmured a greeting that nobody acknowledged and moved toward the kitchen to put away her things. And then she saw it. On Candace's wrist, catching the overhead light with every movement of her fork, was a bracelet. Not just any bracelet. The bracelet Darnell had given Lenora for their first wedding anniversary. A delicate gold chain with a small heart pendant that he had clasped around her wrist in bed one morning, whispering that she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. It had gone missing from Lenora's jewelry box 2 months ago, and she had torn the apartment apart, looking for it, and Darnell had told her she was careless, told her she did not deserve nice things if she could not keep track of them. And now it was on another woman's wrist, at her table, in her home. "That is my bracelet," Lenora said. Her voice came out quiet, but steady, surprising even herself. Candace looked up slowly, the way a cat looks at something that is not worth pouncing on. "Excuse me? On your wrist." "That bracelet. Darnell gave it to me for our anniversary." The table went still. Beverly's fork paused midway to her mouth. Darnell's jaw tightened. And Candace, her to her credit, did not even blink. Darnell spoke first, his voice carrying the sharp edge that Lenora had come to recognize as the warning before the storm. I bought it. That makes it mine to give to whoever I want. You think because I put it on your wrist once, it belongs to you forever? That is your problem, Lenora. You cling to things you do not deserve. Beverly set down her fork and leaned back with the satisfaction of a woman who had been waiting for this moment. She clings to everything. My son, this apartment, that sad little nursing job, like a barnacle on a boat that is trying to sail. Candace smiled then, a slow, deliberate smile that she directed at Lenora like a weapon. I think what Beverly is trying to say is that some things naturally find their way to where they belong. She lifted her wrist and turned it so the bracelet caught the light. It is a beautiful piece. Darnell has wonderful taste, in jewelry at least. The laughter that followed was the sound of 3 people agreeing that Lenora did not matter. And the worst part was that a small, broken voice inside Lenora's head whispered that maybe they were right. She excused herself to the bedroom, closed the door quietly because even her pain was not allowed to make noise in this house, sat on the edge of the bed, and called Clara. She was wearing my bracelet, Clara. In my house, at my table. And he just sat there and told me I did not deserve it. Clara was quiet for exactly 3 seconds, which was a record for her. Then she said, "Girl, the audacity of these people could power a small city. You know what you need? You need to start making a plan. I need to survive, Clara. That is all I can do right now." "No, baby," Clara said, and her voice dropped to something serious and tender. There is a difference between surviving and planning. Surviving means you are still in the water. Planning means you are building a boat, and I need you to start building. Lenora hung up and sat in the dark, listening to the laughter from her own kitchen table, touching the pendant her grandmother had given her, and wondering if there was a version of her life where she was brave enough to walk out the front door and never come back. She did not know it yet, but that door was closer than she imagined. Wednesday arrived with the kind of quiet that comes before something terrible, the way the air goes still before a tornado touches down. Lenora woke early, made the 2 plates again, drove the car with the glowing engine light, and walked into Riverside Memorial Hospital carrying the same hope she always carried that maybe today would be different. Maybe today she would hear about the promotion. Maybe today Darnell would send her a kind text. Maybe today she would remember what it felt like to not be afraid in her own life. Instead, today was the day everything fell apart. Her badge did not work at the staff entrance. She swiped it 3 times, the light blinking red, each time with a small, decisive beep that sounded like a door closing on her future. A security guard she did not recognize appeared and asked her to follow him to the administrative wing. The human resources director was a woman named Sandra Cole, who had kind eyes and an uncomfortable expression that said she had been dreading this conversation. "Mrs. Washington, we have received multiple complaints about your behavior on the ward. Aggressive outbursts toward staff, suspected theft of medication, inappropriate conduct with patients' families. We take these allegations very seriously." Lenora felt the floor shift beneath her feet. "That is not true. None of that is true. I have worked here for 7 years without a single complaint. Ask Dr. Crawford. Ask anyone on my floor. They know me." Sandra shifted papers on her desk without meeting Lenora's eyes. "Dr. Crawford has been advised not to intervene during the investigation. Mrs. Washington, I understand this is difficult, but we are placing you on indefinite leave effective immediately." "Who filed these complaints?" Lenora's voice cracked. "I have a right to know who is accusing me." "The complaints were filed anonymously, but they are detailed and consistent across multiple sources. I am sorry. We have to follow protocol. Lenora walked out of the hospital in a daze, carrying her locker contents in a cardboard box. The drawings the children had made for her, the photos of her grandparents, the extra pair of comfortable shoes she kept for double shifts. 7 years of her life fit into a box small enough to carry with one arm. In the parking lot, still trying to process what had just happened, she saw something that stopped her cold. Candace Thornton was getting out of a sleek black car in the visitors section. She was wearing a suit, the professional kind that said she was here on business, not personal. And when she saw Lenora standing there with her cardboard box, she smiled. Not a friendly smile, not even a mean smile. Something worse, a satisfied smile. The smile of a person who has just watched a plan execute exactly as designed. Candace walked past Lenora and into the hospital's administrative building without saying a word, and Lenora understood. The complaints were detailed and consistent because they had been crafted by an attorney. The multiple sources were fabricated because Candace knew exactly how to make fake allegations look real. This was not Darnell's casual cruelty. This was a strategic destruction of Lenora's professional life, engineered by a woman who wanted Lenora to have nothing, no income, no independence, no way out. Lenora drove home on autopilot, her mind spinning. When she walked through the apartment door, Darnell was on the couch watching television. He glanced at the cardboard box, and his face showed neither surprise nor concern. "Fired?" he said flatly. "Jesus, Lenora, can you do anything right? Now I have to support us completely while you sit around being useless." "I was not fired. I was suspended. There is a difference. Not from where I am sitting." He turned back to the television. "You better figure something out quick, because I am not carrying dead weight." His phone buzzed. Beverly's name appeared on the screen, and he answered on speaker without thinking about it. Or maybe he just did not care. Beverly's voice filled the room. "I told you, son, she is dead weight. Cut her loose before she drags you down with her. Has she found a lawyer yet? Because Candace said the sooner we move on the divorce, the better, before she tries to claim anything." Darnell's eyes flickered to Lenora, and for 1 second, one brief second, she saw something that might have been guilt. But it disappeared so fast she could not be sure it was ever there. "We will talk about this later, Mom," he said, and hung up. Lenora stood in her own living room, holding a cardboard box full of children's drawings, and realized with perfect clarity that her husband, his mother, and his mistress were not just cruel. They were coordinated. This was not carelessness. It was a campaign. That night, after Darnell left for wherever Darnell went, Lenora sat down at the kitchen table with her ancient laptop to update her resume. She needed to find new work, needed income, needed to breathe. But when she opened the laptop, Darnell's email was still logged in from that morning. She should have closed it. She knew that. A better person, or at least a person with more emotional energy, might have respected the privacy of a man who respected nothing about her. But a subject line caught her eye and would not let go. R.E. Asset Strategy. Mitchell Estate. Mitchell was Lenora's maiden name. The Mitchell Estate was her grandparents' property in Georgia. The little wooden house where Thomas and Ruth had raised her with more love than most mansions have ever seen. She opened the email chain. It was between Darnell and Candace, spanning 3 months. The language was legal and precise, Candace's handiwork clearly. They had been researching Lenora's grandparents' property, 40 acres of land in rural Georgia. Their estimate of its value, $200,000 to $300,000. Not a fortune by anyone's standards, but enough to fund the next phase of their plan. The emails detailed everything. Darnell would file for divorce. Candace would represent him. They would claim Lenora was mentally unstable, using the fabricated hospital complaints as evidence. With Lenora discredited and unemployable, Candace would push for a settlement that included the Georgia property. They would sell it, split the profit, and Lenora would be left with nothing. The final email in the chain was from Candace to Darnell, sent just that afternoon. Phase 1 complete. She has been removed from the hospital. Phase 2 begins at the gala Friday. Be ready. Lenora read the words 3 times. Her hands were shaking so hard the laptop screen blurred. Her first instinct was to scream, to call Darnell and confront him, to forward these emails to everyone she knew. But then she heard her grandmother's voice, soft and clear across the years, the way Ruth used to talk when she was teaching Lenora something important. When someone is digging their own grave, baby girl, do not take the shovel out of their hands. Lenora took a breath, then another. She screenshotted every email in the chain, sent them to her own email address, deleted the sent record, closed the laptop. And for the first time in 5 years, instead of crying, she started thinking. Thursday morning arrived with rain, the gentle kind that taps against windows like it is trying to get your attention without being rude about it. 24 hours remained before the gala, and Lenora had not slept. She had spent the night sitting in the dark, turning plans over in her mind, feeling for the first time in years like a person who was capable of making decisions instead of just absorbing them. Darnell had come home at 3 in the morning, smelling like expensive perfume and cheaper whiskey. He had not noticed Lenora was awake. He never noticed anything about her unless it gave him something to criticize. Claire arrived at 9 with 2 bottles of wine, a box of tissues, and the righteous fury of a woman who had been waiting 5 years to say "I told you so," but loved her friend too much to actually say it. "Okay," Lenora said, meeting Claire at the door. "I need your help. But first I need you to listen without interrupting, and I know that is physically painful for you, so I brought wine." Clara's eyes went wide. "Did you just make a joke? A real, actual joke? Oh my God, who are you? And what have you done with my friend?" Despite everything, Lenora smiled. "I found emails, Clara, between Darnell and Candace. They are planning to divorce me, take my grandparents' property, and have me declared mentally unfit. Candace is the one who got me suspended from the hospital." Clara set the wine down very carefully, which was how Lenora knew she was taking this seriously, because Clara never set wine down when she could be drinking it. "I am going to need you to tell me everything, and then I am going to need the address of wherever Candace Thornton parks her car. No violence, Clara. Fine. Aggressive note leaving. Whatever. Tell me everything." Lenora told her everything. The emails, the plan, the bracelet, the years of escalating cruelty that she now understood was not random, but deliberate. A systematic campaign to isolate her, break her, and eventually discard her with nothing. When she finished, Clara was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "We need to organize your grandmother's papers, all of them. If they are coming after the property, we need to know exactly what Ruth and Thomas left behind, and we need to know it before they do." They spent the morning going through boxes that Lenora had stored in the back of her closet since Ruth's death. 2 years of grief had kept her from opening them. 2 years of sadness and avoidance and the weight of loss that made every old photograph feel like a wound reopening. Clara handled the papers with surprising gentleness, sorting them into neat piles on the bedroom floor while Lenora sat cross-legged nearby, touching each item like it was sacred. Old birthday cards, recipes written in Ruth's careful handwriting, a dried flower pressed between the pages of a Bible, and then Clara found it. Lenora. Clara's voice changed, dropped to something Lenora had never heard from her before, something quiet and stunned, and almost frightened. "Who is Marcus Harrison?" Lenora looked up. "I do not know." "Why?" "Because according to this birth certificate, he is your father." The room tilted. Lenora crossed the floor on her knees, and took the document from Clara's trembling hands. It was an official birth certificate, embossed with a state seal, and the names were printed in clear, formal type. Father: Marcus Allen Harrison. Mother: Diana Rose Harrison. Child: Lenora Ruth Harrison. Harrison. The name on her pendant, the name her grandmother had told her, came from love. There is more, Clara said, pulling papers from the box with increasing urgency. An adoption certificate. Legal correspondence from a law firm called Vincent and Associates. And Lenora, there is a letter. It is sealed. Your grandmother's handwriting is on the front. It says, "Open when the time is right." The sealed envelope from Ruth, the one Lenora had forgotten about, pushed to the bottom of a box, along with her grief, unopened for 2 years because she had respected her grandmother's instructions, even when she did not understand them. Lenora held the envelope in both hands. Her name was written on the front in Ruth's elegant, old-fashioned script, and just seeing those familiar loops and curves made tears spill down her cheeks. "Open it," Clara whispered. Lenora broke the seal with shaking fingers and pulled out a letter written on cream-colored paper that smelled faintly of lavender, the way Ruth's entire house had always smelled. "My dearest baby girl," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you are old enough to know the truth. Your father and I wanted to tell you so many times, but we were afraid for your safety, afraid that the truth would put you in danger. Your real parents were Marcus and Diana Harrison. They loved you more than life itself. Our family built something extraordinary, Lenora, an empire worth more than you can imagine. But with that wealth came danger, people who would have harmed you to control the fortune. So your parents made a choice. They asked us, their most trusted family, to raise you in secret, away from the Harrison name. We wanted you to grow up knowing that your worth had nothing to do with money. But baby girl, you need to know who you are. You are the sole heir to the Harrison dynasty. Everything, the estate, the holdings, the foundation, all of it belongs to you. It has been held in trust by a man named Gregory Vincent until your 32nd birthday. On that day, you must claim what is yours. The head trustee will find you. He has been looking. We love you forever. Your grandmother, Ruth. The silence in that bedroom was the loudest thing Lenora had ever heard. Clara spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. Lenora. The Harrison estate. The Harrison Foundation. That gala tomorrow night. It is at the Harrison Estate Mansion. Lenora looked at her with eyes that were trying to process an entirely new reality. I know. That is a $60 billion property. I know. You own it? Lenora looked down at the pendant around her neck. The one Ruth had given her when she was 8. The one engraved with L.H. Harrison Legacy, and for the first time in her life, she understood what those letters meant. She picked up her phone and dialed the numbers on the law firm letterhead. It rang twice before a professional female voice answered. "Vincent and Associates, how may I direct your call?" "This is Lenora Harrison," she said, and her voice did not shake. "I believe Mr. Vincent has been looking for me." The silence on the other end lasted 4 seconds. Then the woman said, in a voice that sounded like she might cry, "Please hold, Miss Harrison. Please hold." And 2 minutes later, Gregory Vincent himself was on the line, and his first words were, "Thank God." Mr. Vincent spoke with the controlled urgency of a man who had been searching for something precious and had finally found it one day before the deadline. "Miss Harrison, we have been looking for you for 3 years. After your grandmother passed, we lost our only contact. Your parents' instructions were clear. The trust activates on your 32nd birthday. That is tomorrow." Lenora pressed the phone harder against her ear, as if better contact could make this reality more real. Can you tell me what the trust includes? Miss Harrison, I think this is a conversation we should have in person, but I can tell you this. You are the sole heir to the Harrison dynasty. The estate, the properties, the foundation, the controlling shares in Harrison Industries. Everything your parents built. It is all yours. Clara, who had her ear pressed against the other side of the phone, made a sound like a small animal being gently stepped on. There is a gala tomorrow evening at the Harrison estate, Mr. Vincent continued. It is the annual foundation charity event. Your parents established it 30 years ago. Miss Harrison, it would be appropriate for you to be there. It is your home. My home, Lenore repeated, testing the words. Your home. And there is something else you should know. The trust documents include detailed records of your parents' concerns about security threats. They suspected the car accident that took their lives was not accidental. That is why they hid you. They sacrificed knowing you to keep you safe. Lenora closed her eyes. All those years, all those gentle deflections from Ruth and Thomas when she asked about her parents, not lies, protection, love in its most painful form. Mr. Vincent, there is something you need to know too, Lenora said. My husband does not know who I am. Nobody in my life knows except the woman sitting next to me right now. Gregory Vincent was quiet for a moment. Then he said carefully, Then tomorrow night will be very interesting. I will have security prepared. After hanging up, Lenora and Clara sat on the bedroom floor, surrounded by documents and revelations. And Clara said the thing they were both thinking. So your husband, who has been telling you that you are worthless for 5 years, is planning to steal your grandparents' tiny property, while you actually own a $60 billion estate. And tomorrow night, you are both going to be standing in your mansion, and he does not know. Lenora nodded. Girl, Clara said slowly, the audacity of these people could power a small city, but yours could light up the whole eastern seaboard. For the first time in as long as she could remember, Lenora felt something unfamiliar. Not hope exactly, something stronger, something with teeth. But the feeling lasted exactly 4 hours. At 3 in the afternoon, Lenora went to the bank. She needed money. Whatever was coming tomorrow, she needed practical resources today. A divorce lawyer, a new phone that Darnell could not monitor, basic supplies to survive the next week while the inheritance was sorted out. She inserted her card at the ATM, checked her balance. Checking account, $0.00. Savings account, $0.00. Lenora stared at the screen. She ran the check again. Same result. Every dollar she had, the money from her nursing paychecks, the small emergency fund she had built over years of careful saving, all of it was gone. She called the bank. A customer service representative confirmed that the funds had been transferred that morning to a new joint investment account. The transfer was authorized by Darnell Washington, who was listed as a joint account holder. Lenora hung up and called Darnell. He answered on the second ring, his voice casual and cold. Oh, that, he said. I moved our finances into a joint investment account for our future. You should be thanking me. I cannot access any of it, Darnell. I have nothing. Then I guess you had better stay on my good side. He hung up. Lenora stood in the bank lobby, holding a phone that felt like a dead thing in her hand. 24 hours ago, she had discovered she was heir to $60 billion. 4 hours ago, she had felt strong for the first time in years, and now she could not afford a cup of coffee. She called Clara, told her what happened. Clara's response was immediate and profane and ended with her saying, You are staying at my apartment tonight. Do not argue with me. I have wine and I have rage, and both of them are at your service. That night, in Clara's warm, messy apartment surrounded by plants and empty wine bottles and the fierce love of the only person who had never given up on her, Lenora sat at the kitchen table and tried to make a plan for tomorrow. I have nothing, Clara. No money, no job, no proof, because Darnell can delete my screenshots remotely through his phone. I know I am a billionaire on paper, but right now, in this moment, I am the most powerless person I know. Clara sat down across from her and took both of Lenora's hands in hers. Listen to me. You have something none of them have. You have the truth. And tomorrow night you are going to walk into that gala, and you are going to stand in your own house, and you are going to let the truth do what it does. What if it is not enough? Clara squeezed her hands. It is always enough. It just does not always feel like it at the time. Friday evening, the Harrison estate glowed like a jewel set into the hillside, its windows throwing golden light across manicured gardens that stretched for acres in every direction. Cars lined the circular drive, black and silver and polished to mirrors, discharging passengers who glittered with diamonds and confidence and the particular kind of self-assurance that comes from never having been told no. Inside, the ballroom was a cathedral of wealth. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings painted with scenes from American history. The marble floors had been imported from quarries in Tuscany and polished until they reflected the guests like still water. A string quartet played something classical and expensive in the corner, and waiters moved through the crowd carrying champagne on silver trays. 500 guests, the most powerful families in the city, old money, new money, and everyone performing their version of importance. And somewhere in this magnificent room, the person who actually owned all of it was about to arrive in a borrowed dress. Clara had performed miracles with limited resources. She had raided 3 closets, her own, her sister's, and one she claimed to have found unattended, and produced a simple black dress that fit Lenora like it had been waiting for her. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed wealth or power. Just elegant simplicity that made Lenora's dark eyes and quiet grace the center of attention for anyone paying close enough attention. But nobody at this gala paid attention to quiet grace. They paid attention to volume, to sparkle, to the performance of success. "You look beautiful," Clara said, adjusting Lenora's pendant. "Now remember the plan. Mr. Vincent is meeting you inside through the service entrance at 8:30. Until then, you are just a guest. Do not confront Darnell. Do not reveal anything. Just observe." Lenora nodded. Then she hugged Clara so tightly that Clara wheezed. "If anything goes wrong," Lenora whispered, "you are the best friend I have ever had." "Nothing is going wrong," Clara said firmly. "And when this is over, I expect a very detailed account of every face Darnell makes when he finds out. I want to know if his left eye twitches first or if he goes full statue. I have money on statue." Lenora entered the ballroom through the main entrance, which felt strange and right at the same time. Walking into a building she now knew she owned, surrounded by people who assumed she was nobody, wearing a dress that was not hers and shoes that pinched, because Clara was a half size smaller. The surreal quality of the moment almost made her dizzy. She saw Darnell immediately. He stood at the center of the largest cluster of people, holding a whiskey like it was a prop in a play about success. He was handsome. She could still admit that, the kind of handsome that made people trust him before they should. His suit was expensive, probably bought with money he did not have, and his smile was wide and practiced and aimed at everyone except the wife he had shoved toward destruction. Candace stood beside him in red, her hand resting on his arm with proprietary ease. She was beautiful and sharp, and she moved through the crowd like she was already measuring rooms for renovation. Beverly hovered nearby, holding champagne and opinions in equal measure, dressed in designer labels that announced her perceived station in life to anyone within eyeshot. Lenora stayed near the edges of the room. She moved quietly, the way she had learned to move in her own home, occupying as little space as possible. But this time, The invisibility was strategic. She watched. She listened. She learned the layout of her own house. The paintings on the walls showed scenes of the Harrison family history. A portrait of Marcus and Diana hung in the east corridor, and when Lenora found it, she stood before it for a long time, looking at the parents she had never known. Marcus had her eyes. Diana had her hands. They looked like people who had been happy, genuinely happy, and the weight of what they had sacrificed to protect her pressed against her chest like a physical thing. She was still standing there when Darnell found her. His voice came from behind, low and dangerous and carrying the particular venom he reserved for moments when he felt his public image was at risk. "What the hell are you doing here?" Lenora turned slowly. "This is a charity event. It is open to the public." "I told you not to come." His eyes swept over her borrowed dress with open contempt. "And you show up looking like that? In front of these people?" Beverly materialized beside him, as she always did when there was cruelty to be dispensed. "Oh Lord, she is here. Someone should call security." And then Candace, completing the formation, champagne in hand, and cruelty in her eyes. "Let her stay, Darnell. It is actually kind of entertaining, like watching a stray cat wander into the opera." Lenora felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the same response her body had been trained to produce over 5 years of this treatment. But underneath it, something new was growing, a quiet steel that had been forged in a bank lobby, tempered in a friend's kitchen, and shaped by a letter from a grandmother who had loved her enough to keep the most important secret in the world. She looked at Darnell and said the thing she had come to say. "I know about the emails, Darnell. I know about the plan to take my grandmother's property. I know Candace fabricated the complaints at my job, and I know you drained our bank accounts yesterday." The circle of people around them went quiet in the way that crowds go quiet when they sense blood in the water. Not shocked silence, anticipatory silence, the kind that comes with slightly widened eyes and tilted champagne glasses, and the unspoken agreement that whatever was about to happen would make an excellent story at brunch tomorrow. Darnell's face went through 3 expressions in rapid succession. First surprise, quick and unguarded, the look of a man who has been caught and knows it. Then calculation, his mind running through options like a machine processing data. And finally, the one he settled on, the one that had worked every time before, righteous indignation. "You are delusional," he said, loud enough for the surrounding guests to hear. "She has been like this for months. Paranoid, aggressive. She lost her job because of it." Beverly added the chorus she had been rehearsing for years. "Someone should call an ambulance." She is clearly having an episode, and Candace, stepping into her role as the reasonable professional, delivered the line that would seal the trap. "As a legal professional, I would advise you to stop making accusations you cannot prove, Lenora. Defamation is a serious matter." Lenora felt the moment crystallize. This was it. This was the confrontation she had planned for, the moment where truth would override power. She had the screenshots. She had the evidence. She reached for her phone with steady hands and opened her photo gallery. The screenshots were gone. Every single one. Deleted. The email chain, the asset strategy, the messages between Darnell and Candace planning her destruction. All of it erased, as if it had never existed. Darnell leaned close enough that only she could hear, and his whisper was the cruelest thing he had ever said to her. "Find My Phone is a wonderful app, Lenora. I watched you screenshot everything in real time. Deleted them this morning, along with your money." He pulled back with a smile that the surrounding guests would interpret as patient concern for a troubled wife. "Honey," he said gently, performing compassion for his audience, "why do you not let me take you home?" "You are not well." The murmuring started immediately. "Poor thing. She seems confused. I heard she was fired from the hospital. Such a shame." He is so patient with her. Candace was already spinning the narrative to a cluster of women nearby, her attorney's voice smooth and authoritative. She has been struggling with mental health issues for months. It is genuinely very sad. We have been trying to get her help. Lenora stood in the center of a room full of people who believed she was crazy, holding a phone that held no evidence, wearing a borrowed dress that suddenly felt like a costume, and the walls of the trap closed around her with a precision that left no gaps. Then Darnell grabbed her arm. His fingers dug into the soft flesh above her elbow, exactly where they always did, in the place that bruised easily and could be covered by sleeves. "I told you to leave," he hissed, the gentle mask dropping now that he was sure the crowd was on his side. "I am sorry, everyone," he announced, pulling her toward the exit. "My wife is unwell. She has been making these accusations for weeks. We are getting her help. Let go of me." Lenora pulled against his grip. "Do not touch me. See?" He turned to the crowd with an expression of exhausted patience. "This is what I deal with. Aggressive, unstable. I have tried everything." Beverly appeared beside them with her champagne and her poison. Poor dear. She was an orphan, you know. No upbringing, no family, no stability. It was only a matter of time before the cracks showed. Candace, from several feet away, but still perfectly audible, added the final brick to the wall. It is actually very common in cases of childhood abandonment. The attachment issues manifest as paranoia and aggression. I have seen it documented extensively. Lenora looked around the ballroom. 500 faces looked back at her with varying expressions of discomfort, fascination, and the particular kind of pity that people feel when they believe someone is losing their mind in public. Not one face showed the thing she was looking for. Not one person in that magnificent room was willing to say that what they were witnessing was wrong. She felt the tears come then, not the quiet tears she had trained herself to produce, the invisible ones that slid down her face without changing her expression, but real tears. The kind that distort your face and shake your shoulders and make sounds you cannot control. "Does not anyone see what is happening?" she said, and her voice broke on the words. "Cannot anyone see this?" Darnell's face changed. The performance dropped away, and what was underneath was ugly and real and honest for the first time all night. "You will never amount to anything," he said. "You are nothing. You came from nothing, and you will leave with nothing." And then he shoved her. His hands hit her shoulders with a force that traveled through her entire body. She stumbled backward, her borrowed heels catching on the hem of Clara's dress. Her arms reached for something, anything, but there was only air and the chandelier light spinning above her, and then the marble floor rushing up to meet her like a verdict. The impact cracked something in her shoulder. Her hip hit the stone with a sound that echoed through the silent ballroom. Blood appeared on her lip where she had bitten it, and the silver pendant, Ruth's pendant, the last gift from a grandmother who had loved her enough to keep the biggest secret in the world, broke free from its already weakened chain and skidded across the Italian marble, spinning in the light until it came to rest against a pair of polished black shoes. 500 people watched. Nobody moved. Mr. Wilson had been working security at the Harrison estate for 40 years. He had been hired by Marcus Harrison himself back when the mansion was new and the Harrison dynasty was still building its empire. He had watched Marcus and Diana fall in love in these hallways, had seen them dance in this very ballroom on their wedding night, had been trusted with secrets that most people could not imagine, and he had been there the night they died. He was 72 now, gray-haired and kind-eyed and slower than he used to be, but his mind was sharp and his memory was sharper, and when the silver pendant slid across the marble and stopped against his shoe, He did not need more than 2 seconds to recognize what he was looking at. The engraving was small, but unmistakable. L.H. Harrison Legacy. He had seen this pendant before. Marcus Harrison had shown it to him 30 years ago, on the night he explained the plan to hide his infant daughter. "If anything happens to us, Wilson," Marcus had said, his voice heavy with the weight of a decision no parent should ever have to make, "this pendant will identify her. When she comes home, you will know." Wilson knelt beside the woman on the floor. She was hurt, bleeding from her lip, her shoulder at an angle that suggested something was damaged inside. Her eyes were full of tears and pain and a sadness so deep it looked like it had been living there for years. But through all of that, he saw something else. He saw Marcus Harrison's eyes looking back at him, and Diana's hands trembling, as they reached for the pendant. "Miss," he whispered, helping her sit up gently. "Are you all right?" She nodded weakly, not trusting her voice. Wilson picked up the pendant with hands that trembled. He read the engraving one more time, to be absolutely certain, though he already was. Then he pulled out his radio and spoke into it quietly, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had waited 40 years for this moment. "Code Harrison, ballroom. She is here. Send Mr. Vincent to the East Corridor, private room, immediately." He did not take Lenora back into the center of the ballroom. He did not announce anything. He did not confront the man who had just shoved the rightful owner of this mansion to the floor. Instead, he helped Lenora to her feet with the gentleness of someone handling something irreplaceable, and he guided her through a side door that most guests did not know existed, down a corridor lined with portraits of her own family, to a private room where the air was quiet and the world could not reach her. He brought her water, a first aid kit, and a clean cloth for her lip. And then he sat across from her and said the words that changed everything. "Miss Harrison, I worked for your parents for 15 years. I was there the night they died. I promised your father that I would protect this estate until you came home." He paused, and his old eyes glistened. "And now you are home." Lenora stared at him. Harrison. Everyone kept saying that name and attaching it to her like a coat she did not remember owning. "My grandmother," she started. "Ruth was the bravest woman I ever knew," Wilson said. "She gave up everything to keep you safe. A comfortable life, a family name, her connection to this world. She lived in a 3-room house in Georgia and grew vegetables in the backyard. And she did it because she loved you more than she loved anything else in this world." 20 minutes later, Gregory Vincent arrived through the service entrance. He was a tall, distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes and the bearing of someone who carried enormous responsibility with practiced grace. He had been searching for Lenora for 3 years, since Ruth's death had severed his last connection to the hidden heir, and the relief on his face when he saw her was so profound it bordered on grief. "Miss Harrison," he said, sitting beside her with a leather briefcase full of documents. "I am so sorry it took this long. Your grandparents hid you extraordinarily well." He opened the briefcase and laid out the truth in paper and ink. Trust documents showing Lenora as the sole beneficiary of the Harrison estate. Property deeds for 47 properties across the country. Controlling shares in Harrison Industries. The charter for the Harrison Foundation, which funded the very gala happening on the other side of the wall. The total value of the estate was $60 billion. Lenora looked at the documents, looked at Vincent, looked at Wilson, who was standing by the door with tears running silently down his weathered face. "He pushed me to the floor," she said quietly, "in my own house, on my own marble." "Yes," Vincent said, and security cameras captured every second of it. Miss Harrison, the question is, what would you like to do? Lenora was quiet for a long time. The muffled sounds of the gala filtered through the walls, music and laughter and the clink of champagne glasses raised by people who had watched her bleed and done nothing. Then she said something that surprised both men. I do not want revenge. I want justice. There is a difference. Lenora called Clara first. The phone rang once before Clara answered, and the sound of aggressive cheesecake consumption was audible in the background. Girl, I have been stress-eating an entire cheesecake waiting for you to call. What happened? Are you okay? Do I need to come down there? I will come down there. I am already putting on shoes. Clara, I need you to come to the Harrison estate. Use the service entrance on the east side and bring your laptop. Why do I feel like I'm about to become an accessory to something incredible? Because you are. And Clara? Bring the cheesecake too. While waiting for Clara, Lenora asked Gregory, Vincent, 3 questions, each one precise, each one strategic, each one reflecting a mind that was not broken by 5 years of abuse but sharpened by it. First, Candace Thornton called in a psychiatric commitment on me tonight. She wants me involuntarily committed. Can we block it? Vincent's expression darkened. She did what? Yes. With your identity confirmed and Judge Holloway present at the gala, we can have it dismissed immediately. Second, Darnell drained my bank accounts yesterday. He transferred everything to a joint investment account I cannot access. Can we trace where the money went? Vincent nodded. Our forensic accountants can have a full trace within hours. If he moved marital funds without your consent, that constitutes financial abuse and fraud. Third, the complaints filed against me at Riverside Memorial Hospital. If Candace fabricated them using her position as an attorney, is that criminal? Vincent almost smiled. It is not just criminal, it is grounds for disbarment. And given that she used fabricated evidence to interfere with medical licensing, there are federal implications as well. Lenora looked at him steadily. Then here is what I would like to do. She did not storm back into the ballroom. She did not stand on a stage and deliver a speech. She did not need 500 people to witness her power in order to know she had it. Instead, she asked Vincent to quietly contact 3 people who were attending the gala. The first was the chairman of the Riverside Memorial Hospital Board, a man named Dr. Thomas Reed, who was currently drinking champagne near the bar. Vincent approached him discreetly and presented evidence that the complaints against Lenora Mitchell, now confirmed as Lenora Harrison, had been fabricated by an attorney committing fraud. Dr. Reed's face went through several colors before settling on a shade of white that suggested he was already calculating the hospital's legal liability. The second was Richard Calloway, the real estate developer who managed Darnell's so-called business deals. Vincent informed him, again discreetly, that Darnell Washington's wife was actually the owner of the Harrison estate. Richard's drink paused halfway to his mouth and stayed there for nearly 15 seconds. The third was Judge Patricia Holloway, a family court judge known for her zero-tolerance approach to domestic violence. Vincent presented her with security footage of Darnell Deo shoving Lenora, along with documentation of financial abuse, evidence fabrication, and a pattern of psychological manipulation spanning 5 years. The judge watched the footage twice, her face settling into an expression that defense attorneys across the state had learned to fear. While these quiet conversations happened around the edges of the ballroom, Darnell, Beverly, and Candace celebrated in the center. They had no idea that the ground beneath them was disappearing. They were too busy congratulating themselves on what they believed was a victory. Then things began to go wrong. Richard Calloway approached Darnell first, wearing an expression that looked like someone had just told him his house was built on a sinkhole. Darnell, he said carefully, I just had the most interesting conversation. Tell me, when exactly were you planning to mention that your wife is a Harrison? A what? Darnell laughed. My wife is nobody. She is a nurse from Georgia. Richard looked at him for a long, uncomfortable moment. Right. Okay. I think I need some air. He walked away. Darnell watched him go with a confused frown, then shrugged and turned back to his conversation. Across the room, the hospital board chairman approached Beverly and interrupted her mid-sentence. Mrs. Washington, are you aware that the complaints filed against your daughter-in-law are currently being investigated as criminal fraud? The attorney who filed them may be facing disbarment. Beverly's champagne glass trembled in her hand, and in a quiet corner, Candace's phone rang. She answered it, and the color drained from her face as the managing partner of her law firm delivered a message that ended with the words, "Clean out your desk. Monday morning." The walls closed in on all three of them simultaneously, from different directions, for different reasons, and none of them understood why. They looked at each other across the ballroom with expressions of growing confusion and alarm, like animals sensing a predator they could not see. Then the doors opened, and a man none of them had expected walked in. Derek Hollister was 40 years old, immaculately dressed, and he had the flat, assessing eyes of a person who viewed other people primarily as obstacles or opportunities. He was a corporate acquisition specialist, which was a polite way of saying he made his living taking things from people who could not defend themselves, and he had been trying to acquire Harrison assets for a decade. He had spies at the gala. Of course he did. A man like Derek did not attend events without intelligence, and when his people informed him that the missing Harrison heir had just been identified, he moved with the speed and precision of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. He found Lenora in the private room, walked in without knocking, sat down without being invited, and delivered a threat that turned Lenora's careful plans into dust. Miss Harrison, he said, with a smile that did not reach his eyes. The missing heir. I have been waiting for this for 10 years. Your parents' trust has a clause. If the heir cannot demonstrate sound judgment and stable personal circumstances by their 32nd birthday, the estate enters a conservatorship, and I have already filed a petition arguing that a woman who is just subject to a psychiatric commitment order does not meet that standard. Vincent's face went pale. The psychiatric commitment Candace filed. Derek smiled wider. Funny how these things work out. By morning, I will have a court order placing the entire Harrison estate under my conservatorship, and then I will buy it at auction for pennies. He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out. The room was silent. Lenora looked at Vincent. Vincent looked at Wilson. And for a terrible moment, the victory they had been building collapsed, like a house made of cards in a sudden wind. Then Lenora spoke, and her voice was calm. That psychiatric commitment. Who has to approve it? A judge, Vincent said, within 72 hours. Is Judge Holloway still in the ballroom? Vincent's eyes widened. Yes, she is. Then we need to talk to her right now. Lenora walked back into the ballroom, not through the side door this time. Through the main entrance, the same door she had entered as a ghost 4 hours ago. But she was not a ghost anymore. She was not invisible. She was not small or quiet or apologizing for existing. She was Lenora Harrison, and she was walking into her own house. She walked directly to Judge Patricia Holloway, who was standing near the east windows with a glass of water and the expression of a woman who had already made several important decisions this evening and was prepared to make more. Your Honor, Lenora said, and her voice carried the steady clarity of someone who has finally stopped being afraid. My name is Lenora Harrison. In approximately 30 minutes, a fraudulent psychiatric commitment order will arrive on a judge's desk with my name on it. It was filed by an attorney named Candace Thornton, who is currently under investigation for fabricating evidence, and a man named Derek Hollister intends to use it to challenge my inheritance. Judge Holloway studied her over the rim of her glass. And why should I believe you? Because Mr. Wilson, who has served this estate for 40 years, can verify my identity. Because Mr. Vincent, head trustee of the Harrison estate, can provide every document you need. And because if you look across this ballroom at the man who pushed me to the floor 2 hours ago, you will see him laughing beside the woman who tried to have me committed. The judge looked across the room. Darnell was indeed laughing, though the laughter had taken on a strained quality. Candace stood beside him, but her eyes were darting toward the exits. Beverly was on her third champagne, and her hands were shaking. "Show me everything," Judge Holloway said. They moved to the private room. Vincent spread the documents across the table. Wilson provided his testimony. The security footage played on a tablet, showing Darnell's shove in high definition from 3 different angles: medical records, financial records, the fabricated hospital complaints, the email chain that Darnell had deleted from Lenora's phone, but which Vincent's team had recovered from the hospital server. Judge Holloway reviewed everything with the focused efficiency of a woman who had spent 30 years separating truth from performance. When she finished, she looked at Lenora with an expression that held respect and something that might have been admiration. "Miss Harrison, in 30 years on the bench, I have learned something about courage. The people who try to silence you are always the ones most afraid of what you will say. You did not need to shout tonight. You just needed to show up and tell the truth. That is more power than most people ever find." She stood up. "Let us go make some announcements." Judge Holloway walked to the center of the ballroom and requested the microphone from the string quartet's podium. The room quieted gradually, the way large rooms do, conversations dying in waves from front to back, until 500 people stood in silence. Champagne glasses suspended, faces turned toward a woman whose authority was unmistakable. "Ladies and gentlemen," the judge began, "I apologize for the interruption. I have several announcements that require your attention. First, an emergency protective order has been issued against Mr. Darnell Washington for domestic battery, committed this evening in front of 500 witnesses and captured on security cameras. Mr. Washington, you are not to come within 500 feet of your wife." Darnell stood up from his chair so fast it toppled backward. "This is absurd," he started. The judge continued without acknowledging him. "Second, a fraudulent psychiatric commitment order filed against Mrs. Washington has been dismissed. The attorney responsible, Miss Candace Thornton, is being referred to the state bar for disbarment proceedings and to the district attorney for criminal charges, including evidence fabrication and conspiracy." Candace was already moving toward the door, her survival instincts kicking in hard and fast. 2 security guards, positioned by Wilson, stepped into her path with the polite firmness of people who were very good at their jobs. Third, Judge Holloway's voice took on a weight that made the chandeliers seem to vibrate. A petition filed by Mr. Derek Hollister to place the Harrison estate into conservatorship has been denied. The petition was based on the fraudulent commitment order, and its dismissal renders the petition without merit. Across the room, Derek Hollister set down his drink with careful precision and walked toward the exit without looking back. He was a man who knew when to cut his losses, and the losses tonight were comprehensive. And finally, Judge Holloway said, and the silence in the room became something you could feel against your skin. "Many of you know that the Harrison family, founders of this estate and one of the most significant philanthropic dynasties in American history, has been without an heir since the tragic passing of Marcus and Diana Harrison 30 years ago. Tonight, it is my honor to introduce their daughter, the sole heir to the Harrison estate and all its holdings, Miss Lenora Harrison. Lenora stepped through the main entrance of the ballroom. She was still wearing Clara's borrowed black dress. Her lip was still swollen from the fall. Her shoulder ached with every heartbeat, and around her neck, reclasped by Wilson's gentle, steady hands, hung the silver pendant that had started everything. She was not flanked by bodyguards. She was not dressed in designer clothes. She did not enter with dramatic music or theatrical lighting. She walked into the room the same way she had walked into it hours ago, quietly, simply, without performance, because Lenora Harrison had never needed performance to be powerful. She had only needed the truth. The ballroom erupted in gasps and whispers that built like a wave. 500 people recalculated everything they thought they knew. The quiet woman in the simple dress, the wife Darnell had called worthless, the orphan Beverly had dismissed, the stray cat Candace had mocked. She owned the ground they were standing on. She owned the walls around them, and the roof above them, and the chandeliers that threw light across their stunned faces. Darnell's face went blank. His brain, so quick with cruelty and calculation, could not process what was happening. The color left his skin in stages, from his cheeks to his forehead to his lips, until he looked like a man watching his own funeral. "That is impossible," he whispered. "She is nobody. She is an orphan from Georgia." "She worked as a nurse. She has everything," Vincent said, stepping forward with the authority of a man who had spent 40 years protecting this moment. "This mansion, valued at $60 billion, belongs to her. The Harrison Foundation that funds this gala belongs to her. The entire Harrison dynasty, all the assets, all the properties, all the holdings, it all belongs to Miss Lenora Harrison, and it always has." Beverly's champagne glass fell from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The sound was sharp and bright and final, like the period at the end of a very long sentence. Lenora looked at Darnell. The man who had told her she was nothing, the man who had stolen her money, destroyed her career, shoved her to the floor of her own mansion. She looked at him with something that was not anger and not triumph. It was clarity. The clear, clean vision of a person who finally sees someone exactly as they are. "You pushed me to the floor of my own house, Darnell," she said quietly. "And the worst part is not that you did not know it was mine. The worst part is that it should not have mattered." She turned to Beverly, who had sunk into a chair and was gripping the armrest like they were the only things keeping her from falling into the earth. "You called me worthless, dead weight, an orphan with no value. But I was always the same person, Beverly. The only thing that changed tonight is that you found out I have money. And the fact that money is what it takes for you to see a human being tells me everything I need to know about who you really are." Beverly opened her mouth. No words came out. For the first time in her life, the woman who always had something cruel to say had nothing at all. Lenora looked at Candace last. The attorney who had engineered the destruction of her career, who had worn her bracelet to her table, who had tried to have her committed to clear the path for a corporate raider. "You wanted what you thought he had," Lenora said. "You stood beside him while he destroyed me because you believed he was successful and powerful and worth having. But he has nothing. He never did. And now, neither do you." From the back of the room, a voice rang out with the unrestrained clarity of a woman who had been holding it in for exactly as long as she could stand. "Girl," Clara shouted, standing on her toes to be seen over the crowd. The audacity of these people could power a whole city. Several guests laughed, not because it was funny in a ha-ha way, but because the tension in the room needed somewhere to go, and Clara's outburst provided the valve. Security escorted Darnell, Beverly, and Candace from the building. Darnell tried to argue, tried to claim marital rights, tried to invoke laws he did not understand and connections he did not have. Beverly wept, theatrical tears that fooled no one. Candace said nothing. She walked out with her head down and her career in ruins, and the knowledge that every choice she had made in the past 3 years had led her to this exact moment of complete professional and personal destruction. The ballroom was quiet after they left. 500 people stood in their expensive clothes, holding their expensive drinks, and felt something uncomfortable pressing against their chests. Something that felt like shame, because every single one of them had watched a woman get pushed to the floor and bleed on the marble, and not one of them had moved to help her. Lenora let them sit with that feeling. She did not absolve them. She did not give a speech about forgiveness or redemption. She simply stood in her own ballroom, in her borrowed dress, and said the things she wanted to say. This gala will continue. All donations tonight will go to scholarships for orphaned children. In memory of my parents, Marcus and Diana Harrison, and in honor of my grandparents, Thomas and Ruth, who raised me to know that my worth had nothing to do with money. The applause that followed was complicated. It was guilt and admiration and relief and the particular kind of respect that people feel when they have witnessed something they know they will remember for the rest of their lives. 6 months later, Lenora stood in a cemetery in rural Georgia, placing fresh flowers on 2 simple headstones. Thomas Harrison, Ruth Harrison, loving grandparents, her real family. The rain had stopped an hour ago, and the sun was breaking through the clouds in long golden beams that made the wet grass shine. The silver pendant hung around her neck, catching the light the way it always did, connecting her to parents she had never known and grandparents who had given her everything that mattered. "Thank you," she whispered, kneeling in the grass. "Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for raising me to know that true wealth is not about what you own. Thank you for teaching me that my worth was never in what others saw in me. It was always in who I am when nobody is watching." She had established the Ruth and Thomas Harrison Foundation. 400 scholarships in the first year alone given to children who reminded her of herself, kids raised by grandparents, kids in foster care, kids who had been told they were nobody. She built community centers in underserved neighborhoods. She created programs for women escaping abusive relationships, staffed by counselors and lawyers who provided services for free because some debts are paid forward, not back. The Harrison Estate Mansion had been converted into a community center. The ballroom where she had bled now hosted birthday parties for children and reunions for families and celebrations that filled the marble halls with laughter instead of cruelty. She had personally overseen the renovation, keeping the chandeliers and the marble floors, but adding warmth, color, art made by children, photographs of families. The sounds of joy where there had once been only performance. She lived simply. A modest home in a quiet neighborhood, a regular car, regular clothes. She drove herself to the foundation every morning and worked alongside her staff, meeting the scholarship recipients, listening to their stories, telling them the thing her grandfather had told her on Sunday afternoons by the fishing pond in Georgia. True wealth is not in what you show. It is in who you are when nobody is watching. Clara's car pulled up to the cemetery, horn honking because Clara always honked. It was genetic. "Lenora Harrison," Clara yelled through the window. "If you do not get in this car, we are going to be late for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, and I did not get my hair done for nothing." Lenora laughed. A real laugh. The kind that starts deep in the belly and rises through the chest and comes out warm and full and alive. She still had hard mornings. She still flinched sometimes at sudden movements. She still woke up at 5:15 and checked the other side of the bed before remembering that she lived alone now, that the empty bed was a choice, that solitude could be peaceful instead of painful. Healing was not a destination. It was a daily practice, a choice to keep choosing herself even when the old voices whispered that she was not worth choosing. But the old voices were getting quieter, and her own voice was getting stronger. She placed one more flower on each grave, touched the headstones with gentle fingers, and whispered, "I love you both. I will make you proud." Then she walked to the car, and Clara handed her a coffee, and they drove away together toward a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new women's shelter that would bear Ruth's name. The Harrison Foundation's newest project, built on the simple principle that every person deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of what their bank account says about them. In the rear-view mirror, the cemetery grew smaller. The headstones caught the last of the afternoon sun, and for just a moment, if you believed in such things, you might have seen two figures standing beside the graves, an old man with kind eyes and a woman who smelled like lavender, watching their granddaughter drive away with their love and their legacy, and the knowledge that the greatest inheritance they had given her was never the $60 billion. It was the unshakable truth that her worth was never, not once, not for a single moment, determined by what others thought of her. It was always, always determined by who she was when nobody was watching. And who she was, it turned out, was extraordinary. This story was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful content with real emotional value. Every word was crafted with purpose, because we believe stories should not just entertain. They should leave you with something worth carrying.